Hi guys, this is Mike. In this Cinema 4D tutorial, I'm going to show you how to sculpt a creature head. In this tutorial, we're going to be using the sculpting tools. We'll use Inflate, Knife, Pinch, Pull, Grab, Flatten, and Wax. We'll also be using a stamp for high frequency sculpting. We'll also be using layers and making a polygon copy. I'm going to work in a few different sculpts in order to complete this entire sculpting project. One is obviously the sculpting head, or the creature head, and we'll also have a tongue, sculpting these teeth and the gums of our creature. So I'm going to start off with this base mesh. And you can feel free to use this one, or maybe a base mesh that you downloaded on the internet, or maybe just make your own from scratch. But I wanted to focus entirely on sculpting instead of modeling out the topology for this project. So what I'm going to start doing is, first, let's head on over to the sculpting layout and make sure you have creature head selected. And then what I want to do is subdivide. And what that's going to do is when you click on subdivide, you can see a slight visual change with your model. And if you head on over to your Objects tab, you can see that it added in a sculpting tag. So at this point, you can now start manipulating your sculpt. But we want to do a few things first. Because this is going to be, at least at first, a symmetrical creature, a symmetrical sculpt, we're gonna want symmetry on, so we can work on one side of the face. So in order to do that, what we want to do is we want to click on one of our tools. So we'll go to Pull, and if you go to Symmetry, you want to have X checked as your symmetry plane. And you can see the symmetry by the white dot on the left part of your screen, right part of your creature's face. And so whatever you do here, whatever you sculpt here will affect on the other side. So, but you also want to have link symmetry checked as well. So when you go to another tool, it's already going to have symmetry on. So you don't have to accidentally start moving something, moving your geometry or adjusting the sculpt, and then it's, you have to undo and go back and recheck symmetry. So just keep that in mind. So we're going to go to first Pull, and you can see that I've added in some, when I made this base mesh, you can see that I have some lines, little extra lines around the eyes and around the mouth. These are going to be, as well as the nose, these are going to be the areas that are going to have the most wrinkles. They're going to have the most movement in a creature. So it's going to have a lot of folds in the flesh, in the skin. So that will have a lot more wrinkles and details that we can work with. So we definitely want to have a little bit more geometry to work with. And then as you get higher into the top of the head, there's less geometry, but we're going to have less details a little less details than say the face and around the eyes. Okay, so what I want to do is, and this is when sculpting, you'll probably hear this a lot in other tutorials, is that you want to start off very large and just start adding in some not fine details, but you want to add in some larger additions to your sculpt. And then as you subdivide and add in more geometry to work with, you get finer and finer details. So we're going to be doing that in this tutorial as well. Now what I like to do is, I seem to always go towards the eyes when I first start, and this goes along with drawing as well. I always kind of just start with the eyes and then kind of work my way around. And I might also keep referencing to drawing, because I found that as I've been drawing, you're going to use a lot of the same techniques. So I'm going to do some basic broad shapes, broad sculpting. So in the pull tool, and we just don't quite have enough geometry in order to start pulling out. So we're going to have to go up one subdivision. And you can see the edge flow of the model, of the base mesh, and where we want to put our wrinkles. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to start pulling out a little bit at a time, and trying not to get too stuck on one area. I tend to always start with the eyes. And I'm just going to start pulling out a little bit around the cheekbone, around the eyebrow, and just kind of pull upwards. And I know I don't have a whole lot of geometry in which to work with. And you'll see me using pulling away from the model, but also using the control modifier to push in. And I'll be going back and forth in that process of just pulling out and then pushing in on the side in order to give it some a little bit of shape. And I'm using a mouse. I also have a Wacom tablet. It's a little bit better for sculpting because you can you have pressure sensitivity. But if you don't have a tablet, that's not a problem. I'm using a mouse, and you can just kind of just move along and just kind of go around your model and just kind of think about, look at reference, look at older people, older faces, look at where there's wear and tear along the mouth, and thinking about where you're going to be putting in some of these additions and subtractions into your sculpt. And I'm not going to spend too much time on around the head too much, at least not at first. And so I'll be going back and forth with the settings, the brush size. You can use the bracket, the open bracket and the closed bracket to adjust your size of your brush, regardless of what tool you're using. And maybe I want to pull out a little bit over here. I want to pull out this cheek, push in, give it a little, sink it in a little bit more. And I'm pretty much running into an area where I just don't quite have enough geometry. So you just kind of want to use as much as you can, or work with this as much as you can. And shape it as best as you can within this geometry at level 1. And just kind of want to be a little bit careful around the eyes, because you know, you might have to go back to the grab tool. That's way too big. And maybe just kind of shape this a little bit. Kind of want the kind of want his eyes almost kind of bulging out a little bit. And you know, this is, a lot of things are subjective, and just using your own artistry to what you're trying to achieve. And I recommend just going for it, just going and shaping the way that you want to. Because if you don't like it, then you can just use the smooth tool and just kind of tap it just to kind of smooth things out. If you go a little too far, you know, always look at the perspective, the side of your model and see where things are kind of pulling out. Maybe you didn't notice that you pushed in or pulled out a little bit too much. Okay, so what I want to do is just want to put in another wrinkle here, along here, push in a little bit. Maybe drop the size a tad, and just kind of pull this out a little bit. And follow along the edge flow of your model. So I'm right at the point now where I want to start bringing in going up another subdivision. And I want to do something with these nostrils, but I just don't quite, I can use Inflate. For this, what I want to do is I want to give this a little bit more thickness around the nostrils. A little too thin here, so I kind of use Inflate. Just kind of, tool does exactly what you think it does. It just kind of inflates blows up the what you're brushing on. And I tend to go subtle with the sculpting tools, because you want this to be a process. You want this to be a process where you're slowly making adjustments and just slowly refining. And I want to smooth this a little bit, so I'm going to bring down the size and just kind of just tap around, just kind of move this and just kind of smooth this out a tad if it gets a little too rough. And you just want to slowly kind of build your model. I think that's okay for now. Let me work around this mouth a little bit before I go up another subdivision. And the reason why you want to go with kind of a slow process is that you want to take your time and get the shape done correctly in this lower geometry, lower amount of geometry. And you can see the poly count here, 1864. You want to keep an eye on it. You know, you want to see how much memory you're going to be using. You know, if you're going to be, you know, this for this tutorial, I'm only going to be just sculpting out. But a lot of times what you'll end up doing is baking out your geometry and then applying the displacement map to your base level geometry. So that way you can have your details without having this bogged down with so much geometry. And I'll show you as we get up and up further along in the levels how many polygons we have. But in this tutorial is more introductory. So I'm not going to be getting into baking out maps just yet in this tutorial. I will in the future. I particularly like digital sculpting, and what I want to do is I want to give a little bit of a divot here right underneath the nose. Not too much. I'm going to undo. Let me go back a little bit, try again. Just kind of tap it. And just kind of raise up a little bit here. I'm not loving the mouth and the lips. But we'll move along as we we'll continue to refine. But I really like Cinema 4D sculpting. And I know that there's other more dedicated. Let me just pull this up a little bit. And what I want is to have this come out a little bit. And same up here. Maybe push in a little bit here if I can. Raise up subtly. And I know there's dedicated sculpting programs like Zbrush and Mudbox. And this is just my opinion. I think Zbrush is a very unintuitive program. And it's got some, and it's an industry standard for a lot of industries if you're doing concept work. But it's just such an unintuitive, just not an unintuitive program that you're learning ZBrush as opposed to being an artist and sculpting. So I'm going to go up one subdivision. You can see that now we have some detail, and I'll turn off the lines NA. You can kind of take a look at what work we've done here so far. I'm going to bring lines back NB on your keyboard. And you can kind of see, I like to use the lines because I want to take a look at where I am in terms of the edge flow. But Zbrush is, it's got some great tools, don't get me wrong. And if you want to learn Zbrush and you want to spend the time, there is some great tools that you can use within Zbrush. And it's obvious if you look online. I'll bring the size down a bit. Actually, I'll keep the size, but I'll bring down the pressure. You look online and you can see some amazing work. So there's no question that you can create amazing work. I like Z-spheres for quickly making model geometry. I like Dynamesh. You can kind of remesh your geometry as you're sculpting, so you don't have to worry about edge flow and all of that kind of stuff. You just kind of model. Bring up the size a little bit, just a little bit too. There we go. And it's got some great brushes. I mean, ZBrush has some really nice brushes, but it's too much. It's too much for a beginner sculptor. When you're just trying to learn digital sculpting, it's overwhelming. You have to learn a lot of different aspects of it. Nothing prepares you for learning ZBrush. Not Maya, not 3ds Max, not Cinema 4D. It's just its own kind of program. But Cinema 4D has some really nice tools, and you can do some pretty nice work. I'm just going to pull this out a tad. And then you have Mudbox, and if you are I would recommend using Mudbox if you already have Maya experience. I've never used Mudbox, I've only used ZBrush, but at least if you're going to learn a program, you can then leverage what you've learned. Either if you learn Maya first, then you already have that experience, and that fits in with that pipeline, Mudbox Maya pipeline. And I just want to build a little bit more of this nostril, and I kind of feel this is getting a little messy here. I'm just kind of build this out. I want to smooth this out a little bit. It's just not, there we go. So there's definitely some programs that you can use, and I'm sure there's others, but I particularly like Cinema 4D. I want to spend some time on this eye, or around the eye I should say. So I'm going to start pulling this out, and that's good. I like that. And I'll pull a little bit around here. And let me spend some time on this ear. Maybe pull this out a little bit, push this in, shape it a little bit. And as you can tell, it's not really a human ear. It's almost a little Dragon Ball Z-ish. But I really didn't want to... my main focus is really on the face and spending some time a little bit on getting the wrinkles and the shapes, and just kind of going through a lot of these tools, as many as I can. And that might be a little too much. Just kind of giving a little bit of a divot underneath the chin, and may have to smooth that out a bit. Okay, let me bring up the size and just kind of... So it's a back and forth process, as you can tell. And just like drawing, you start out real loose, broad strokes, and then you slowly tighten up. You slowly start adding in lines, removing lines, refining edges. Until you start getting the shape that you want. Not really liking this. I want to smooth this out a little bit. Okay, I want to push in a little bit, pull out a little bit, be a little too much. Start pulling these out a little bit. Getting this brow a little bit more defined. And I feel like I'm almost ready to start going up another notch, another subdivision. Get this all like really wrinkly. It's looking pretty good for now. And before I go up another subdivision, I just want to pull this maybe a little bit further down. Just get them really angry. Give them a lot of attitude. Pull this up just tiniest of bits. And let me push this in a tad. Okay. Look from this angle. Look at every angle. Look from the top, Just kind of get really good look at every angle that you can, because sometimes you'll just be working along and then you'll be like, you move it from one position and you're just like, I don't really like this. Maybe you do like it, you know, maybe there's an area where you can refine a little bit better. You don't want to get too bogged down. Like I said, you want to get slowly tighter and tighter and tighter. And I think I want to pull out a little bit around this jawline, just a little bit. Okay, smooth that out just a tad. Alright, I want to go up another subdivision. Let's go to NA. Take a look at that. It's looking good. And you can see our poly count. It's going up a little bit. So let's go up another subdivision. And at this point, I usually turn off the lines. So I got the basic idea of where I'm going to be putting in a lot of these wrinkles, a lot of these creases, and the lines are really just starting to become distracting at this point when they get so many and you start getting really dense lines. I'm not seeing the wrinkles like I want to see them, so I usually turn that off. So NA. And from here on out, I usually keep them off and just kind of work. So I don't want to make this video extremely long. So I might pause and just work a little bit. Pull. And just kind of continue on, because you kind of get the idea of what I'm trying to accomplish. Main idea here is just to show you the tools and give you some tips, you know, along the way. And I don't really like that. Smooth that out. You also have to be a little bit conscious of it not getting too lumpy. You'll get that if you don't spend enough time in the process, early on in the process. That's just what I have found, is if you go up a subdivision too quickly and you just want to get into the details of the wrinkles and stuff like that, it ends up kind of getting a little lumpy, in my opinion. So you want to make sure you got your base geometry pretty good, and then spend the time in the 1 and the 2 subdivision levels and just really work out what you're trying to accomplish with your model. The wrinkles, the indentations, the little creases, and then you'll get to the details and it'll be much more satisfying. Okay, so I'm gonna pause and I'll get right back. So I'm just moving along here. And what I want to do is I want to go down a subdivision. And I'm going to use a grab tool. And I want to pull down slightly. as I was sculpting a little bit in between recording, I was kind of noticing that maybe I want his cheek and his eye to be sagging a little bit. Like the flesh is just sort of hanging off him a little bit more. And this is where you want to be careful. What I said before about making things looking a little too lumpy. Let's go back to the pool. I just want to maybe refine, bring down the size. And I think I want to go up a subdivision. I think that's what's happening here. And I want to be able to just start building up a little bit more around the eye, making this kind of sag, push in a little bit, making it sag a little bit, and just kind of working it until you get some shapes and creases that you like. Want to put in a little bit more work in here, and what I'm doing is just kind of building up and just kind of building this up a little bit here. Push this in, pull this up, and just, you know, just kind of having some fun with it. You know, kind of adding in some areas, smoothing them out. Oh, that's looking pretty cool. I think this is a little bit too, let me smooth this a little bit. And just want to be careful. Because I want this to be, so you want to be careful with the grab tool at this level. Smooth this out a little bit. Okay, let's try the Flatten Tool. I'm going to drop the pressure down and the size. And coming over here with the nostril, and let me bring the size down a bit. And I just want to flatten this. And let me go to the Inflate. Just make this nostril a little bit more pronounced. And then flatten it out, flatten the bottom out of the hole. There we go. And maybe pull up a little bit, because I want his nostrils to look pretty flared. Pull this back so you can kind of almost see in the nostril. And I think that's okay. And it's just kind of working it a little bit. Work this cheekbone a little bit. And now what I want to do is I want to start using the wax tool. I really like using the wax tool because you can start, let me just take a spot around here. What I like the wax tool is that you can just kind of build up areas in order to make it look a little rougher. And just kind of build up shapes, build up the sculpt, and roughen up a little bit of your model. And I like to kind of go crisscross and pull up from the forehead all the way over and around to the top of the head, top of the skull. And just pull back this way. And it definitely helps if you understand a little bit of geometry, a little bit of anatomy. And it's probably a little too much there. And just how muscles connect. I'm certainly not an expert, but I like to look at the anatomy of what I'm doing just to kind of get a visual sense, get an idea. And now what I want to do, kind of have that roughed up a little bit. What I want to do now is I want to use the knife tool. And I like to use steady stroke. You may not like it, but let me bring the pressure down. And I found that you want to keep the size up a bit. And I'll show you what I mean in a second. So steady stroke is going to give you this little line that comes out, and you can kind of see where that is, and you can adjust how long that line is. You know, that's just like really absurdly long, but I'm just kind of demonstrating. I like it around 10 or so. And let me bring down the size and the pressure. So if you go too small, then what you get is not the best looking knife cut because of our geometry level. So I like to use a larger brush size and keep the pressure not so high. What we're after here is to get a better separation between things. Like around here in these creases of the nose, these nose wrinkles. I'm gonna pull this down maybe. Around the eye is a good place where you really want to start making some deeper lines. Around the mouth, that's a little too much. And what you're gonna find is that one. What you're going to find is you're going to be using the knife tool and the pinch. A lot with each other. They kind of work with each other. The pinch is gonna, the knife is gonna cut in a groove, and the pinch is gonna bring in those two sides closer to each other, and you'll see a little bit nicer effect. Like right around here, if you really work it, you can really start to see that a little bit in there. And so what I'm doing is I'm just kind of going around the model, around the sculpt, and I'm just kind of just giving it, putting in some lines where I think would, kind of make sense. And we're almost ready to go up another level. Let's see, maybe around here. And just have some fun, really just kind of play around a little bit and just kind of see what works and, what doesn't. I mean, maybe you don't like that, you want to just kind of bring that up a little bit. I like the crisscross. A lot of the areas, it gives it a little bit better of a maybe I can undo that, but like a crisscross sort of seems to make it look a little bit more natural. And if you don't like something, kind of smooth it out, start again. Especially if you get some really sharp creases that you may not like. So you can kind of see where some of the geometry is a little bit larger on the forehead, a little bit more spaced out than, say, all the bunched up details in the face. So you'll lose a little bit of resolution up here. Just keep that in mind. I want to work this mouth a little bit more, but we're getting there. I'm going to cut in here, start cutting in some areas. Get a little bit of faceting over here where the geometry is kind of, you do that kind of intersection and the geometry doesn't support that as well. And so, you'd be in here in Zbrush and you'd be like, oh, you got some faceting here. You just do, just a stroke and you got Dynamesh and it remeshes your geometry. So, there's some good points in Zbrush. It's unfortunate that it is such an unintuitive program that, you just kind of feel like you're fighting the program instead of making stuff. Yeah, just kind of shape this a little bit. I didn't like how that nostril was kind of like a little too thick, a little bit down in the bottom. And maybe I want to hold down Control, dig in to that nostril a little bit, give it a little bit more better of a hole. Something like that, maybe. You can keep pushing in until you kind of get some dark shadows in there. That's pretty cool. And so we're looking pretty cool. What else? Maybe around this ear, cut in underneath. Maybe I want to pull. Oh, and by the way, you can use steady stroke on any particular brush that you want. If that works for you a little bit. This just helps you guide it, guide your strokes. Build this up a little bit. Dig in here into this cheek a little bit. Okay, let's go up another subdivision. So we're 29,000 right now. Now we're at 119,000. So let's take a look at our lines. So as you can see, it's getting pretty dense. And now we're at the point where we can start adding in some higher frequency details. Maybe not quite just yet, but we can start really getting into some of the details a little bit more here. And this is where you can bring down the brush sizes and increase the pressure. Really start, that's way too much. Really start getting in, bring down the pressure a little bit. Getting some of the finer details. There we go. Little wrinkles around the mouth where there's a lot of movement. And what you want to do, is be careful of your background. And just kind of think about how your mouth moves and what parts of the flesh get a lot of. There we go. That's looking pretty cool. Parts of your face that gets a lot of movement. And that's where you want to concentrate your lines and your wrinkles. And just kind of experiment and crisscross and drop in some lines. Get something like this. Oh, that's looking pretty mean and nasty. And I don't like this pinch right here. So I'm going to smooth this a bit. Maybe bulk it up a little bit. Again, I need a drink of water. And I want to pull this out a little bit. Thicken this up a little bit. I just didn't like how that was just kind of pinching. It's still not right. Let's go to smooth that out a little bit. That's better. Certain areas that pinch, when you do a pull and then you put in a knife, you lose something. And so I want to bring up my pressure on my smooth. So you're going to be spending some time kind of smoothing out, and when you get into some of your higher subdivision levels, it takes a little bit more pressure to smooth things out that don't look right. So just keep that in mind. And let's get down here in the mouth. So knife. And I just want to put in some lines and spend some time and really just kind of crafting your little model. Maybe you don't want it as wrinkly as mine is getting. That's okay, you can kind of smooth that out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop again, spend a little bit more time and just putting in some areas and shapes and wrinkles. Get around the nostrils a little bit. And don't be afraid to use your pinch in some areas. Like in here. Down in here. Really dig in. And tighten up that area where there's a heavy, deep crease. Right in here. Let me go to the knife and let me give that, you know, that thing, that crow's feet that you get around the eyes, the corner of the eyes there, like crisscross maybe. No. So sometimes some things just don't look right. And you just want to kind of go back and forth. Okay, so I'm going to spend a little bit more time and putting in some more detail. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this ear. And get ready to wrap up this tutorial. I want to get into some high frequency detail before I end this tutorial, but I just want to spend a little bit more time on this ear. I kind of feel like it's been kind of neglected compared to the rest of the model. So I just want to, it's not going to be very realistic, but there's no reason why you can't spend some time giving it some shape and some details. Oop, that came out a little weird. So I'm just using the Inflate tool to give me a little bit more bulk around here a little bit, and then I'll smooth it out. Like on the inside here. This really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I'm just kind of having some fun. Smoothing this out a little bit here. And this looks kind of bubbly, but we'll just kind of work it a little bit. Knife, and I'll just kind of, you know, like I was doing before, just kind of give it some like that flesh is just sort of hanging off him. He's just so old and decrepit creature. Like maybe he's lived for 1,000 years. And we just kind of make it droopy. And let's bring the pull tool and just bring some stuff out a little bit. You know, you kind of get to a point where you're using all the tools and you don't even think about it. You just bounce around from one to the next based on experience. You know, not that I'm the super experienced at digital sculpting, but you know, after a while, and that's the benefit I believe with Cinema 4D, is that you don't have 30, 50 tools to learn. You're learning these basic tools. It's like Bruce Lee. He had this quote, and I don't want to botch it up because I'm a huge Bruce Lee fan, but he says he's more afraid of the person that can throw one kick 10,000 times than the person that knows that has thrown one kick or thrown 10,000 different kicks once. And I'm sure I screwed that up, but you get the point, is that if you focus on a very small amount of tools, you're just going to get better and better at that, and you'll just be way more refined and more in-depth knowledge with those tools, these 10 tools or so, as opposed to 50 or whatever. And so I'm just kind of shaping this a little bit better, giving it a little flesh in the back of the ear. Just kind of working it a little bit. And I reworked this top over here. I didn't like how it was looking. The top of his mouth, right above his lips. I just didn't like how it was looking, so I just I smoothed it out. And then what I did was I just put the wax tool and just kind of build it up a little bit, and then drew in some lines away from the mouth, pulling away from the lines, away from the lips, excuse me. And as you can see, it seemed like I was losing a little bit of this shape of this crease of flesh that was coming out from the wrinkle of the nose all the way down around the cheek and around the mouth. So I redefined that a little bit more. And I still feel that it could use a little bit of inflate, like on the sides here. And what I found is that what works to make things a little bit more realistic when you're putting in some flesh is down at the bottom, as the wrinkle comes down, you want to smooth that out a little bit. So there's a transition where you have this ripple and then it slowly fades into and melts into the rest of the flesh. I know that sounded disgusting, but you just kind of just blend it in a little bit more. Same with the lines. As the lines come out, smooth out the ends, smooth out the bottoms, so it blends in with your sculpt. Okay, what's next? What do you want to do now? I'm liking pretty much everything, except I think we can spend a little bit more time putting in some lines throughout our character that's not in the face. We don't want to neglect the rest of our model, even in the back, even if it's not going to be seen. Just from a craftsman point of view, you don't want to ever leave things untouched. Steve Jobs, when he was, developing his products in Apple computers, he had this quote that he had from his father. He learned good craftsmanship from his father, who was a woodworking, and they were building a fence for his backyard, and they made it so well crafted that even behind the fence of his house that he grew up in, even that, the back where no one will see it, even that was well polished, well crafted, and well worked. And that fence stood there throughout his entire, even after he was, moved out. And that craftsmanship followed him through his time at building products at Apple Computers, to the point where he was so obsessed with making the circuit boards looking nice and pretty. And I appreciate that. I appreciate good craftsmanship. And I'm just kind of putting in lines throughout the model, giving it some wrinkliness in the back where no one's going to see it. It's not going to be viewed, but we're going to do it anyway because we want to develop a good craftsmanship habits, just good craftsmanship habits. And let's not forget the sides here. Pull back, take a look. What's missing? What haven't I touched? And there's so much things in the world that are just slapped together and cheap. And let's just get it done. without any consideration of just craftsmanship and just taking your time and, you know, making a 3-hour tutorial, which this is probably going to be. But, you know, it's about doing things right. And it's about doing your work right. And spending the time and putting in the hours in order to make something that you're proud of, you know? And, you know, this is just sort of like just a quick tutorial, learning tools. Oop, that was too deep. Smooth that out. But even still, I don't want to just slap something together and throw it online and expect people to be like wowed by it. I want to put in the time and put in the work in order to make something and craft something out really nice as best as I can. I don't know, that's just me. Have you ever found something, any product that you ever used that it just didn't work? And you're just like, you feel like you've been had, you feel like you've been taken by somebody. And that's not how I want to operate. I want to put out the best work that I can do. And craft something really nice. So we have these floating teeth, and I'm gonna shape these a little bit in the in between the videos, but we also have to consider the inside of the mouth as well. So we're at a pretty high subdivision. You can drop this down a little bit, but I just want to put in some of this wax, using the wax tool, and just kind of shaping out the inside of the mouth a little bit. And we're gonna have a place for the gums so our teeth can get in there, you know. And let me just kind of build this up a little bit. So I'm just kind of using the wax tool and building up the gums a little bit so we have a place for the teeth. And I know these teeth don't look like teeth, and I'm going to shape these up a little bit more. I don't want to spend too much time. Maybe I'll just do one tooth. And how does that look? Let me pull out. Oh man. That looks gnarly. And yeah, I know that there's some faceting where these lines aren't totally perfect because of the resolution. We can go up another level and that will smooth that out a bit. Okay, so we have that, and we have this tongue. So what I'm gonna do is save this. Let me go to objects. And I started doing something with the gums, like a separate piece of geometry, but I didn't think that looked all that great, and I wanted the gums to feel a little bit more organically connected to the sculpt. So we're looking good, I think. I'm trying to see if there's anywhere I haven't touched. And I had an idea of like having this kind of closed off, and you can see the spinal cord and the windpipe, and it was kind of like disconnected, like his head was severed, and then he's kind of have this death scream, frozen into his face. But I didn't want to make this, absurdly, insanely long tutorial, so I'm just gonna keep it just like that. And there's a little bit of faceting here. Smooth that out a tad. Okay, so what I want to do is let me grab this tooth, and you can see how I set this up. I just made one tooth. Let me grab a large one. Excuse me. Mouth is getting dry. And so I'm in right now I'm in model mode, and you can see this tooth. This geometry, how I made this was just, I made a cube, shaped it into a rectangle, and then used Subdivide, commands Subdivide, and then I used smooth Subdivision, and that kind of rounded everything off. And that's how I made this tooth in geometry. So what I can do is I can subdivide this. Just make sure, okay, I'm in this large tooth, and you can see how I set this up. I just basically copied these teeth and put that in a null, and then made the top teeth, just put them in another null, and then I just put that into a subdivision, a symmetry object, in order to quickly make some teeth, because without the teeth he just looked like some crazy old man. So with large selected, I'm going to subdivide this. And let me just go back here. Whoops, a daisy. I'm going to undo. I accidentally subdivided I went up a level in our main creature head. Try that again. I think because I had the tag selected, and that's where that, yeah, there we go. So sorry about that. I had the tag selected, the subdivision, the sculpting tag for the creature head selected. So when I subdivided, it subdivided that model. Okay, so now I have this tooth with the subdivision tag. Let me go to the sculpting, and I'll go up one more. So I'm at level 1, and I'll just shape this very quickly. I don't want to spend too much time on this. It's not exactly where I wanted to spend my time showing you this. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of shaping this out a little bit, into somewhat of a fang, you know, a sharp kind of tooth that kind of curves in a little bit. And maybe I'll smooth this a little bit because it's getting a little yucky. And I'm in smooth size. There we go. And I just wanted to spend a little bit time shaping this out a little bit. And you can spend as much time on that as you want. Let me pull back. You know, is it too small? Is it too big? Maybe you want this to be you know, really long, really big tooth. Lost a little bit of the sharpness here. You know, that's really your call. Maybe it's a little bit too big. Maybe I want to smooth it out a little bit. Oops. Just kind of tap it to and you have to, if you have to turn off your creature head so you can see what's going on back here. And I'm a little hamstrung by the geometry. I spent a little bit more time kind of crafting a better tooth. This would look a little bit better. But I think that's all right. I'll subdivide this. Maybe another one. There we go. So it's looking pretty good. Let me maybe throw some wax on it. Make it not so pretty and smooth. Keep in mind this thing is a monster. So you just want to kind of put in some grooves a little bit, maybe in the back as well. Okay, so so what I'm going to do is with this, I mean, let me bring back our creature. Yeah, it's looking pretty cool. So what you can do is you have your large selected, and then you can go to let's see here, large tooth selected, sculpting layers, and create polygon copy. And now I can hide this. So this original one I have has the sculpting tag on it. This new copy is now just a piece of geometry, just like anything, and you can then duplicate it, you can transform it, make it smaller, move it around, you know, do whatever you want to it, and use that as the basis of your teeth. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is play around a little bit with that, and when I come back, what we're gonna do is wrap this up and put in some high frequency detail and just close this tutorial out. And okay, I'll see you then. Okay, I put in the teeth and shaped the tongue a little bit. And as you can see, I just kind of placed them intersecting with our creature sculpt. So I want to spend a little bit of time showing you the high frequency detail that we can add into our brushes. So I put in Content Browser. I just peeled that off. I just went to Window, Content Browser, and then peel that off and put that in our side palette. And if you go to your sculpting folder, sculpt brush presets, you have a few different images that you can use, these alphas that you can use to add in some detail into your sculpt. I went to organic, and you can choose really any one of these that you want in order to excuse me, in order to give you the detail that you like. I just went to human skin. Let's use this one, and you can see the preset brush size and pressure settings here. We have symmetry on, so let's make sure that's on. And let's increase our pressure, and let's decrease our size. And I'm in the pull tool, and I have the steady stroke turned off. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to maybe bring this setting down a little bit, bring the brush size down. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move along our sculpt. Now it's not really showing up because we just don't have enough detail, so I'm going to hit Subdivision, Subdivide, excuse me, and that might take a bit because now we're getting into higher polygon count. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just move along our sculpt, and maybe that's a little bit too much in terms of detail. So you can increase the size, decrease the pressure a little bit. That's a little bit better. And what we can do is we can just go along our model and just add in this high frequency detail into our sculpt. Now, what you can do, you can use these. I didn't really talk about these, but you can add in a layer. Let me undo the work that I did here with the high frequency detail. And if I add in this layer, I can add in our detail. I don't normally use the layers except for this purpose. And the reason why is that as I'm moving along this surface with this layer on, I then have the ability to decrease the strength of our detail if it's a little bit too much, or I can turn it off altogether. So it's definitely helpful, but just keep in mind that whatever subdivision level that you are at when you create the layer, excuse me, that's the way it's going to stay at. So if you go up another subdivision layer, it won't affect this layer. It will stay at level 5. So just keep that in mind. And that's why you want to do this at the end of your process. So you can go along and I do have symmetry on, so I can go along our model and add in this high frequency detail and give it that last touch of sculpting. And I'm just kind of moving along and just giving it, make sure I get the face right along here, and it just gives it that extra detail. Whereas maybe it was a little too smooth. And this gives it, and you can go inside if you want, but that doesn't, actually that really doesn't make sense because we don't have that kind of detail in the mouth. But along the lips and the mouth, the ear, just kind of make sure you get everything, and underneath the neck and the back of the neck, the back of the head, and just make sure you get every little spot. Make sure you get the top of the head. And so that's really it. That's all I really wanted to show you. This was a fun little creature project. And you know, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but you know, Zbrush and other tools have some great features. But Cinema 4D is quite, as you can see, you can make some pretty awesome stuff if you spend the time and you learn the tools and you really just get in there and kind of craft it. You can make some really awesome stuff here in Cinema 4D. And you're in Cinema 4D, so whatever. If you want to render, if you want to put in materials, you got body paint, you can start painting. You can UV, apply UVs, you can bake maps. We'll talk about that in later videos. And then you can apply that to a mesh and animate if that's your end goal. So you can do that all here in Cinema 4D. So maybe this is a little too much. Maybe it's a little too detailed. You can bring that down a bit to maybe 50%, and that's it. I put a link in the description to download project files. You can also go to astronomic3d.com to download project files from this tutorial and all the tutorials that I've made so far. Thanks for watching.